Hi, I'm Kathleen Murphy, and welcome to Murf Unfiltered. I'm here today with Susan Gonya in part 2 of our series, which we're calling What's Hiding in Your Food? Hint, it's not good. So I'm going to do a quick little recap for those of you who may not have seen episode 1. I highly encourage you to watch episode 1 because it's chock full of incredible information that you're not going to want to miss. But I'll do a quick recap in terms of what we talked about. The first thing that we talked about was the fact that Susan just released this book called The Fungus Among Us, Science and Recipes for a Cleaner Diet. So incredible book. I have read it. It's amazing. It not only has really incredible stories in it, but it also has recipes and ingredients for you to follow along with. And I'm not such a great cook. Susan knows that. So if I can follow along and make these recipes happen, I know anybody can. So again, thank you for being here. And I'll do a quick recap. And what we talked about was we talked about the fact that you just released this book recently. In August.
In August.
I mean, just last month.
I released it on Amazon.com.
We're still in September. That's right. And it's also going to be available on your website, which is in the process of being rolled out, but isn't there yet. Your website.
In about a week or two from today.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not far off. Okay,
No.
that's not far off. And we talked about the why behind you brought this book out, all the research that went into supporting bringing this book to life. And we also talked about who the characters are, the cast of characters in terms of the why, most importantly, in terms of why you wrote this book. And it was really an ode to both your son, Dylan, and your daughter, Abby, to have a historical reference of all the work that you've done to support giving them the ability to have these clean diets to help support them in the challenges that they have with gastrointestinal challenges. Dylan having Crohn's disease and having been diagnosed at 8 years old. And we talked about your credentials, which are absolutely phenomenal. So again, people, please go back and take a listen to what Susan's credentials are, because she is absolutely phenomenal. Hint, there are a lot of incredible letters, including being an RN, a registered dietitian. You have master's degrees, undergraduate degrees. You're a critical care nurse as well. I mean, your background is absolutely phenomenal. It's so impressive. And we talked about who's noticing your research as well, because it's not just myself. It's plenty of other people that have benefited from following this diet that you've come out with and the special ingredients that are supported by the recipes that you put together, who were really sick people and are now experiencing feeling much, much better, which is a testament to the 8+ years of research that you've done and put into this. And we also talked a little bit about some science words, the mycotoxins, and you defined that for people in terms of what that meant. It wasn't something that I was familiar with, but when you came up with the term vomit toxin, or I'm not saying that probably right, but
No, you're saying it correctly.
Okay, that one really just it embedded right in between my eyes, and I don't think I'll ever forget that word. And I heard that and I thought, oh my gosh, you've got my attention now. Is this in my food? Is this going to be a problem for me? Turns out it could be, very much so. So this is a good segue into the first question that I'm going to ask you in this segment is, can anyone benefit from the findings and recipes noted in your book? I know I have eaten recipes from your diet you've cooked for me at your house, and I'll tell you, and I recently spent 3 days at your house with another dear friend of ours, a shout out to Cheryl Cromer, who is our editor and our publisher for both of our books. Yep. And I'll tell you, after 3 days coming away from your house, after only eating the clean food that you gave me, and I don't have issues necessarily with my health per se from a gastrointestinal challenge, but I felt marvelous. And I attribute it to the food that you made. Yes.
So
but I want to thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. So, and thank you for being here again today. Can anybody benefit from this? I'm telling you that I did, and that's just a short 3 days. But I mean, people don't do 3-day diets. That's not realistic. Mm-hmm. Who can benefit from this? And can it be anybody?
I think just about anybody, everyone can benefit from having, from eating less toxins in their diet. And when you look at toxins, I looked at vomit toxin initially, but now we're looking at many, many more. Different mycotoxins that are highly prevalent in food can adversely affect different organ systems like your liver, your brain, your gastrointestinal system, even your immune system. For example, things like aflatoxin can drop your immune system significantly. So can so many of the emerging mycotoxins that we're now seeing in foods. So I think pretty much everybody could benefit from that. I think that if you want to talk about it in terms of even longevity and healthy living and aging in a very scientific basic sense, many mycotoxins adversely affect mitochondria. People don't always know what mitochondria is.
Oh, thank you for telling us what that means.
Oh, yeah. No, mitochondria is sort of a catchword in longevity medicine. And, we see it on the internet all the time.
Okay.
If your mitochondria aren't functioning properly, you're going to be low in energy.
Okay.
Unfortunately, some of these toxins will actually not only undermine mitochondria, but they'll destroy mitochondria, leading to ultimately cellular death. Most cells in the human body have mitochondria, so people will suffer from fatigue and brain fog. We have many, many, many mitochondria in our brain cells, so we definitely don't want to undermine the health of mitochondria in our brain cells. But in the very real sense, in terms of longevity medicine, we're always looking at supplements out there. Let's, live longer. Let's fuel the mitochondria. Q10. Let's use urolithin, and different vitamins that are being marketed right now.
And clean food.
And clean
as
food.
defined by, you talked about whole foods, so whole foods meaning
even maybe
fruits, vegetables from your farm stand. Local farm stand, hopefully.
Oh, yeah. But
possible.
I mean, in the very real sense, aging gracefully and perhaps even aging more slowly is something that I think we're going to find out occurs when people switch away from eating so many mycotoxins. And does that mean you have to eat nothing but fruits and vegetables all the time?
Right.
I mean, honestly, I never would have gotten my children to stick to the diet if I hadn't redesigned a Toll House cookie.
Right.
And
pizza.
And pizza.
The pizza's phenomenal.
Right. And bagels.
Bagels. Those are to die for.
Thank you. So I had to do a lot of experimentation and certainly a lot of testing of flours before I settled in on clean flours. But
right.
If you're saying, wow, that food pizza's bad for you because it has XYZ preservatives and things in it, I get that. But people basically say, well, obviously eating too much sugar is not good for you.
Right.
But is that going to stop them from eating that cookie?
No,
right.
absolutely.
So what I did was I tried to compare apples to apples with this, and I basically said, all right, let's create a pizza that tastes like a pizza.
Yes.
And let's create a bagel that tastes like a bagel, and a cookie that tastes
even better.
like a cookie, maybe even better than a regular cookie, right?
Yours are.
And let's see what happens. Is it the sugar? Are people becoming sick from the sugar, or could it be these hidden toxins?
Right.
And miraculously, even with cookies and pizza and bagels, my son got better. And other people have gotten better, and other people. So you have to say that, maybe, mitochondrial aging isn't all about sugar.
Right.
Maybe it's not even all about all those things, but certainly destroying mitochondria with toxins in our diet that we can't see, smell, or taste is probably not a good idea.
Not a good idea at all.
Especially when these are seriously mitigated. We're able to mitigate these.
So let me ask you this. It seems that potentially for people that have very serious diseases, such as colitis, such as Crohn's disease, such as other gastrointestinal diseases, the first course of action doesn't typically, and I was reading in your book, you had suggested to Dylan's doctor potentially that an idea that you had was to potentially switch up his diet as part of the treatment plan, and he scoffed at that idea. But is medication the only solution for people that have these serious diseases? Is that the prognosis of the course that they're going to be on for the rest of their life, having to be on these serious medications? Or is there a combination of medication and changing up the diet and or potentially reducing the medications at some point because the diet becomes so good and so much better and is starting to perhaps also help to reduce the inflammation that's
Well, so that's the
going
goal.
on?
So by decreasing inflammation with using a targeted low mycotoxin diet, I think we took the first step. Obviously, these aren't clinical trials. This is case study research. We took the first step and said, okay, wait a minute. We took these out, and we saw such amazing improvement. A child that was only supposed to be 5'9" 9 feet tall. Grew to be over 6'1",
Right.
and it started thriving, and his GI tract certainly healed up. Does that mean he wasn't on medication? No, we had doubled his medication, and he was having adverse side effects from that medication. He ended up with tuberculosis from the medication. So there are side effects on the flip side of that, though. Those medications are, in fact, life-saving and gut-saving. So they can help to put out the body on fire. That's going to lead to surgical interventions that goes along with dangerous diseases like inflammatory bowel disease. So are we ready to throw away medications for inflammatory bowel disease? No, we're not there yet. There's more research, but we're hoping that by just looking at these hints at what might be going on in our food supply, that more research will occur, mitigation will occur, and at the very least will lessen the amount of medication people have to take over time using a healthy, clean diet. One more thing, though, IBS, being just irritable bowel syndrome, can be very well controlled with diet, as can celiac. There are, the gold standard treatment for a disease like celiac is a gluten-free diet.
Okay.
Which includes
no medication?
No medication.
Okay.
These days, we are starting to do immunosuppressive medications somewhat on our celiacs because they're finding they have intractable stomach pain no matter what. But if you take the question, it becomes for these very, very sensitive people, is it a low gluten exposure or is it that they're being hit with mycotoxins?
Exactly. So that leads me to ask you another question then. So just because somebody's on medication, does that give them that has, say, Crohn's disease and they're on some serious medication, does that give them a pass to be able to eat whatever they want if they are on this medication and not necessarily subscribe to a diet like this? What's going on? If you do subscribe to a diet like this, or don't subscribe to a diet like this, and you just eat whatever, are you doing yourself a disservice? Do you need to be doing
on so many levels,
both having your medication under control and then also doing being on a diet like this that's going to help support the efforts of reducing the inflammation and making you feel better? But can you talk to me about the people that don't have their doctor say to them that they need to alter their diet, that they just only talk to them purely about the medication aspect? If, say, for example, they have something like Crohn's disease or maybe some other kind of disease where they could also benefit from, a diet like this? Sure.
I mean, honestly, old school thinking in medicine was that diet didn't matter. And I was told as a dietitian, diet didn't matter.
Gosh.
So, that was a little traumatizing for a dietitian to have a doctor say diet doesn't matter. But truthfully, these are diseases of the gastrointestinal tract and in your body. So, of course, diet matters. So, in a very real sense.
For everybody,
everybody. I mean, if you want to avoid cardiovascular disease, if you want to avoid diabetes, if you want to, there's a lot
of... How about Alzheimer's? Cancer.
Diet matters on every front. Cancer. But in a very...
Autism?
Potentially autism spectrum disorder as well. So in a very real sense, there are some really good doctors out there now, though, that are on board. And recently I heard about a doctor making a comment that actually to my son, because he's done so well over the years, and then he asked him, they had started a dialogue on what are you eating? And so my son knows a lot about what he eats. I've educated him as he's gone here. He's been going through this process with us. Right. So basically the doctor said people who, and I agree with this from my perspective as somebody who's also been in healthcare for over 30 years, those who do not monitor their diet and eat a healthy diet not only end up with these secondary illnesses like diabetes, like strokes, like cardiovascular disease, but they will they will never feel the full effect of these medications. They may never even get that inflammation in their gut under wraps. So a complementary diet, and there's lots of really, one size doesn't fit all. There's lots of good diets out there. It doesn't have to be what's in my cookbook. There's lots of really great whole food diet recipes and regimens out there that people can follow. I'm a huge advocate of that. But those who follow a more careful diet and eat a fairly healthy diet, well, they just do so much better. The inflammation goes out. Eventually, my experience, and I would say other healthcare providers may have a different experience, so I'm open to that. My experience as a practitioner is that eventually, if somebody does not monitor what they eat, their medication is going to fail.
That's really unfortunate. And so thank you for responding to those questions. I have another question for you in terms of, do people get worse? You've seen them. I think you've responded to the fact that if people aren't paying attention to their diet and also the medication that they're taking, they could in fact get worse if they don't switch up and start taking a look seriously at their diet. But where do we go from here in terms of appreciating that there are so many people in our country right now that are experiencing at younger and younger ages these diseases that we didn't even have necessarily being that prevalent when we were growing up. Diseases such as, you name them. I mean, you know what these diseases
diabetes,
are.
Even obesity. I mean, so I think that this is a very new, understudied, unrecognized science, first of all. So,
okay. And why is that?
That's a really good question because so many other substances, including food colorings and, hydrogenated shortenings have been, all kinds of PFAS. We mentioned them before, have been under the microscope for very long, but almost nobody ever talks about dietary mycotoxins. So the World Health Organization does talk about dietary mycotoxins, but they're not making a very large statement on it. They're basically saying these are an inevitable part of having a global food economy. Something that I disagree with. But I think looking at the purity coffees, the relative foods, the addictive wellness cacao products that are out there, and many of the other, and these organic farms that I'm starting to bond with that can actually mail you food right from their farm.
I love that.
Are doing a much better job, and those foods are all clean. So it can be done.
It can be done. Well, I was most encouraged by the fact that I love chocolate and I love pizza. Those are a couple of my favorite foods. And you told me that chocolate was really problematic from potentially having mold toxicity. But yet you had found a source for people like myself that like chocolate to be ensured that the chocolate I could be eating would be healthy and wouldn't be causing me challenges. So thank you for that. How many people do you think are impacted from the mold in our system? And who are these people that are impacted? Who's the most impacted?
So if you look at who the most impacted people are, I think we have to look at infants and children.
Elderly people also?
And elderly people also.
And what is qualifying as elderly? Are we talking?
I would say anything over 55 would be pushing into the elderly equation there because as we get older, our metabolic systems slow down. We make fewer enzymes. We're aging. Things are moving along more slowly. Another thing that you see happens and is looked at in longevity medicine is people's ability to filter out and detoxify these contaminants.
Good point.
A young, strong adult that's fairly large might have a much easier time. They might be acutely ill if they get exposed to something. Say something that mimics food poisoning, like fungal toxins in the food supply, but particularly for their small body size and their immature detoxification systems, we really need to be concerned about infants and children. And that's been the lion's share of my research, especially since my own son became ill as a very small child.
And we want our children to be healthy.
We want our children to be healthy.
They are our
Give
future.
them every advantage.
The last thing that we want to see them is to be ill in any way. And we're seeing way too many children that are far sicker than we've seen in decades more recently with epidemics potentially, and we'll get into that in a second. But can you talk a little bit about the how behind helping us to understand how we can take back control of having access to the cleaner sort of food and knowledge that you provided us with?
Great question.
Thank you.
Taking back control is, can happen in a lot of areas. So according to the World Health Organization, there's multiple contributors to this situation, one being global warming. Mm-hmm. So, looking at even our industrial farming techniques, we know that we can increase our CO2 footprint, increasing global warming by as much as 20% with industrial farming, whereas organic, sustainable, regenerative farming practices actually help rebuild the soil and will actually help reverse global warming. In addition to that, they add lots of healthy microbes. So we're all popping these probiotics like they're going out of style, right, to put things back. But if you're eating pesticides, if you're eating food that is devoid of microorganisms because they were sprayed with pesticides, which have antibiotic-like qualities, right? Sure. You're not only eating food that's less nutritious, you're also necessitating the use of things like probiotics, and perhaps even those probiotics you took are being killed by the next meal.
Oh, gosh.
With all the chemicals that are on that meal.
I hadn't considered that.
Preservatives, additives, things like that.
Oh, gosh.
To add to that, just choosing your farm, who you buy your food from, and knowing, everybody says, organic foods are so expensive. But you know what? The truth is, the more we eat them, the more there's a demand for them, the lower the costs are going to be.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Economies of scale.
That's right. Exactly.
So that's a big one. But the biggest one, and this is where we're really hammering into the research recently, I'm working on a study right now looking at 121 foods marketed to children, is that we're really thinking that it's the global commerce. Our food that we see here in the U.S. might have ingredients sourced from anywhere in the world. That means that it's going to be transported on a barge across an ocean. It's probably not going to be flown there. It's too heavy.
Right.
One that doesn't have humidity or climate controls to control these things. Then once it gets here, it's going to be in a boxcar and driven across the U.S. for God knows how long, again, under non-humidified controls. And then we'll end up in storage somewhere until production needs in a region necessitate its use. By then, it could have a significant mold count. And what we're seeing are the types of molds that are setting up in our foods are not necessarily the molds that set up in the field. Okay. It might be the same species, but they're secreting different mycotoxins. They're sitting there long enough and some of those mycotoxins, like aflatoxins, and some emerging ones that we haven't seen before, maybe because we didn't have the technology, we didn't see them. Maybe they were there all along. But I think it might have even more to do with the fact that we're just not being careful in our transport. And they are serious liver toxins. And so we're looking at the big picture and seeing so much fatty liver, and everybody's pinning it on one thing or another. And I'm saying, wow, why isn't anybody looking at mycotoxins?
Right.
Maybe because nobody's looking at mycotoxins.
Exactly. That's
pretty much
a distinct possibility. Real quickly, could you tell us how long it might take for somebody to potentially repair, somebody that's healthy, that wants to switch to perhaps having a much kind of cleaner diet and start to pay attention to what they're eating? How long does it take for somebody to repair if they stay with having a healthier diet?
So
the damage that may have occurred through the mycotoxins.
You make fantastic points. One, it does depend on the individual.
Okay.
Somebody's age,
where they're starting,
somebody's
from a
body size, certainly genetics,
Yep.
and how well certain people detoxify things all influence that equation. And also if there's any, again, you said healthy, but pre-existing disease will make it probably more difficult for somebody to feel better sooner.
Okay.
But I think, people who are basically incredibly healthy, like yourself, who were, ate a low mycotoxin diet for 3 days and said you felt great afterward. Let's say days to weeks at most, where you can all of a sudden start saying, wow, I feel so much better all of a sudden. What's going on?
I know.
My brain fog, if I had any brain fog, it might be clearing. All those things.
Absolutely. Just music to my ears and very encouraging. I want to have you give us some parting words in terms of what you might want the public to know about that you're so passionate about as it relates to the research findings that you've talked about today that maybe we didn't cover in the last minute or so?
Okay. I think parting words wise, I want to say that, our research community is growing. We certainly need funding for research. So
Yes.
anybody feels generous and wants to fund this research, it would be much appreciated and will actually move the needle in the right direction.
Touché,
But not alone. People and practitioners are starting to look at this in the U.S. There is going to be a website available for that, hammering into the research on that. And looking at, the research meaning not just looking at prevalence in our food supply, but also what these individual mycotoxins are actually doing in terms of, we know some of them affect brain function, and we're looking at them for autism spectrum disorder,
Right.
and for Alzheimer's.
Right.
In addition to that, we're not just looking at prevalence. We want to look at it in terms of removing it from the diets of those who are sick. So we can look at before and afters, monitor their blood values, monitor their urine, look at what actually happens and compare those parameters. But lastly, I think the research is really important because everybody, I believe, deserves a clean, safe diet.
I think so too.
And I think that...
And to be healthy.
And to be healthy.
Feel healthy.
Everybody
Yes.
deserves clean, safe food.
That's perfect.
It's
Thank
just
you.
a right. It shouldn't be a privilege. It should be a right.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I want to thank you, Susan, from the bottom of my heart for the research and the time and the commitment and the passion that you have towards doing the studying, putting in the work all these years and continuing to do that. I talk to you sometimes late at night and you're still awake and you're still doing research and early in the morning. It's really remarkable. And I just love the fact that you just want people to have a passion for being healthy. And so thank you so much. And I want to thank our audience today for being with us here on Murf Unfiltered. Come back again. Hope you really enjoyed our show today. We've got lots more shows. And I also want to say this is our 60th episode. So thank you for watching and come back to see us again soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.